This is a preview of the romance book Fourth Down Desire, written by Alexi Hart. If you enjoy this preview and would like to read or listen to the full versions, links are in the details below. Chapter 1. Mason. The bar was 40 pounds, and Mason Cross had moved it 218 times since Marcus called. He knew because he counted. He always counted. Repetition was the only honest math. No spin, no narrative, no carefully worded statement through a publicist. Just load and movement, and the body's clear accounting of what it could do. 219. Leo Bennett stood at the rack with his arms crossed and the expression of a man who had been a trainer long enough to know when pushing back was wasted breath. He'd stopped coaching the set around rep 160. Now he was just monitoring, the way you monitored a controlled burn. "You want to tell me what Marcus said?" Leo said, not a question. "No." "Okay." 220. The Apex Performance Center was quiet at this hour, 8 in the evening, Mountain Time, most of the facility's residents having already cycled through dinner and recovery. Mason had eaten at 5, alone, the way he preferred. The weight room smelled like rubber and iron, and the particular clean sweat smell of high-functioning bodies. He'd spent enough time here in the last 3 months that it had started to feel more like home than his actual apartment in Chicago, which said something he wasn't interested in examining. He racked the bar. "Gridiron Magazine," he said. Leo nodded slowly. The profile. "Marcus says it's done. Finalized. The journalist arrives tomorrow. He told you that 3 weeks ago. You said no." "I said it was a terrible idea." Marcus said a lot of things after that, and apparently at some point I stopped saying no clearly enough. Mason sat up on the bench and pressed his palms to his knees. His hands were good hands, large, precise, the instrument of his entire professional life. He looked at them like they might offer some guidance. They didn't. A long-form profile, redemption arc. I believe the word comeback was used multiple times. "You collapsed in the 4th quarter of the divisional playoffs." "Thank you, Leo. I was there." "I mean, you didn't retire. You didn't get arrested. You lost a game." He shrugged. "People have been rebuilt from worse." "I don't need to be rebuilt." Mason stood, picked up his water bottle, drank. "I need people to move on. A profile is the opposite of moving on. A profile is a spotlight. It's managed scrutiny with good photography. Then manage it." That's what I told Marcus. He said, and I'm quoting, "Mason, the only thing worse than a spotlight is no spotlight. And right now, you have no spotlight." Leo considered this. Marcus isn't wrong. Marcus is never wrong, which is one of the most genuinely annoying things about him. Mason moved to the cable machine, adjusted the weight. His other point, which he made repeatedly, is that Gridiron specifically requested me, not the Phantoms, me. He thinks refusing reads as guilty. Does it? "I don't know what I am," Mason said, and the honesty of it surprised him enough that he stopped moving for a moment. He set the weight down without meaning to. "I know what happened. I know why I made the call I made. I don't know how to explain it in a way that doesn't sound like excuses." Leo was quiet for a beat. This was one of the things Mason valued about him. He didn't rush to fill silence with reassurance. "Who's the journalist?" Leo asked. "Sloane Mercer." Leo's eyebrows moved. "I've read her work. And?" "She's good. She's really good." He paused. "She's also not going to let you run the interview." The cable machine hummed. Mason pulled the weight through its arc, felt the resistance, released. "Nobody runs the interview on me," he said. Leo didn't say anything. He had the professionally courteous expression of someone who disagreed, but had decided to let reality make the argument for him. Mason ran 4 more sets. Then he ran 2 miles on the outdoor track in the dark, the Rockies enormous and indifferent above him. And by the time he got back to his room, he had almost convinced himself this was manageable. He was very good at convincing himself of things. He showered, sat on the edge of the bed, and opened his phone to the only text from Marcus he hadn't answered. She's done profiles on Keller, Vasquez, and Tate. All 3 said the same thing after. Fair, thorough, doesn't burn her sources. You're in good hands. Mason read it twice. Then he put the phone face down and lay back on top of the covers, still in his towel, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the 4th quarter. He was always thinking about the 4th quarter. It had been 12 weeks. The Phantoms had finished 7-9, missed the playoffs for the first time in 4 years, and the press had been exactly what he expected: relentless, personal, revisionist. Every decision he'd made in that final drive got autopsied in print and on air, with the confidence of people who'd never stood at the line with 30 seconds left and a defense that had adjusted 3 times in the last 2 minutes. They'd been wrong about what happened. Not completely. He'd made one bad read, one, and it had cost them the game. But the story they built around it was wrong, and Mason Cross was not capable of not knowing the difference between accurate and inaccurate. Sloane Mercer. He'd read 2 of her pieces before refusing Marcus's first call. Long form, textured, the kind of writing that turned athletes into actual people. He could see why Marcus liked her for this. He could also see why she was dangerous. He closed his eyes. The Rockies outside made no sound. The facility was silent. He told himself, one more time, that he could manage this. He almost believed it. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Chapter 2. Sloane. The thing about Mason Cross was not that he was beautiful, though he was 6'4", built like architecture, the kind of physical presence that made a room recalibrate when he walked in. Sloane had been covering elite athletes for 7 years, and she'd stopped noticing beautiful a long time ago. The thing about Mason Cross was his press conference transcripts. She had them pulled up on her laptop on the flight from O'Hare to Denver, 40 minutes into a 2-hour flight, and she was doing what she always did with new subjects, reading for the negative space. What got answered versus what got asked. Where the language went smooth and rehearsed versus where it caught on something real. Mason Cross was very, very good at the smooth and rehearsed. His answers were technically responsive to every question, and substantively empty of anything a journalist actually wanted. He gave statistics in contexts that made them meaningless. He praised teammates with specificity and himself with humility, and neither told you anything real about how he thought about the game. He was, on the record, the most complete non-presence she had ever encountered in a professional athlete. She found this interesting. Sloane was 39,000 feet above Kansas, notebook open beside the laptop, when she found the first crack. January press conference, 3 weeks after the playoff loss. A reporter from the Chicago Tribune asked about the 4th quarter read that led to the turnover. Standard question, already asked a dozen times before. Mason's answer was standard too. Takes responsibility, learned from it, looking forward. She'd read this answer before, but the Tribune transcript had the full audio timestamp, and she'd cross-referenced it with a clip online, and there was a 2.3-second pause before he started talking. 2.3 seconds! For a quarterback who was trained to process information and make decisions in a fraction of that. He hadn't been stalling. He'd been deciding what version to give them. She underlined the timestamp and wrote beside it, knows the real answer. Chose a different one. Why? The flight attendant came by with drinks. Sloane got a coffee and went back to her transcripts, and by the time they landed in Denver, she had 17 such notations and a very clear picture of the shape of the wall around Mason Cross, if not what was behind it. She'd find out what was behind it. She always did. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Apex Performance Center sat at 6,000 feet in the foothills west of Denver, which meant the air had a quality to it that Sloane's Chicago lungs immediately registered as insufficient. She stepped out of the rental car and stood for a moment in the parking lot, breathing carefully, taking in the facility. It was impressive. She'd expected impressive. This was where serious athletes came to get more serious. But the scale of it was still notable. Modern architecture in glass and stone that looked like it had grown out of the mountain rather than been placed on it. The main building's south face was nearly all window, and through it she could see training equipment, pools, what looked like a full athletic training floor. A smaller building to the east bore the medical center signage. She had 2 weeks here. Embedded access. Mason's team had negotiated the parameters. She could attend training sessions, interview supporting staff, conduct daily sessions with Mason himself. He had final approval on the photography. He did not have final approval on the article, which was one of the things she'd been told he'd pushed back on. Good. She didn't want someone who'd cooperate fully. Full cooperation was PR. Dr. Elena Navarro met her at the entrance. Mid-40s, direct handshake, the particular efficiency of someone who managed a lot of egos with a minimum of theater. She gave Sloane the tour at a brisk pace, narrating in the clipped way of someone who'd given this tour before and saw no reason to editorialize. The facility was everything the brochure claimed, and then some. Recovery pools, a hyperbaric chamber, rehabilitation bays with equipment Sloane couldn't name, but that looked expensive and purposeful. The kitchen and dining area could have served a restaurant. The training floor was huge, skylit, and currently occupied by 2 people Sloane didn't recognize running agility drills. Mason's session is at 3, Dr. Navarro said. He knows you're arriving today. Your first formal interview is scheduled for tomorrow morning. I know. I'd still like to observe the 3 o'clock, if that's permitted. A slight pause. That's within scope. Great. They turned a corner and came out onto the mezzanine overlooking the main training floor. And that was when she saw him. Mason Cross was on the far side of the floor, working with a trainer she later learned was Leo Bennett, running a footwork drill with a ball in his hands. He was in practice shorts and a gray compression shirt, and he moved the way she'd seen him move on film, with the kind of controlled precision that read as effortless and was anything but. She knew enough about quarterbacks to know what it took to move like that. The footwork was a craft. He hadn't seen her yet. She watched him run the drill 3 times, drop the ball twice in a row on the 4th in a way that clearly annoyed him. She could read the set of his shoulders from 40 feet above, and then catch himself and reset. Sloane registered the pull, the way she registered everything. Clearly, efficiently. Filed under, not relevant. She was here to write a story. The story was about who Mason Cross was when the press conferences ended. She'd keep that straight. She'd always kept it straight. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. He looked up and saw her. When she was leaving the mezzanine, she caught the shift in his attention from the corner of her eye, even 30 feet away and 1 flight of stairs removed. She didn't stop walking. She had her bag and her notebook and a room assignment from Dr. Navarro, and she didn't owe him an introductory moment on his timeline. They would meet tomorrow, on the record. She went to her room, unpacked with the efficient automation of someone who traveled for work constantly, set her notebook on the desk, and opened her laptop. She started with everything she didn't yet know. That was always the better place to start. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Chapter 3. Mason. She was already in the interview room when he arrived. He was 4 minutes early. She'd been there before him. He noted this, filed it, and sat down across the table from her with the practiced ease of a man who had been giving press conferences since he was 22 years old. "Mason Cross," he said. "Sloane Mercer." She extended a hand across the table, and he shook it. Her grip was firm and brief, and she didn't hold on. "Thank you for agreeing to this." "My agent sends his regards." A corner of her mouth moved. It was not quite a smile. "I know he was part of the conversation. I also know you eventually said yes, which means part of you wanted to." He looked at her. She looked back. She had dark eyes and a quality of attention that he recognized from exactly no one he'd ever met, like she was reading something just past the surface of whatever he was showing her. She had a notebook open on the table and a recorder running, and neither felt like the actual threat. "Let's say I saw the professional value," he said. "Let's say that." She picked up her pen. "I want to start before the season. Tell me about your off-season, what you did, what you thought about, September through December." He gave her the standard answer. He heard himself giving it: the training regimen, the film review, the work with the new offensive coordinator. It was all true. It was also the kind of true that covered without revealing. She wrote something down. Then she looked up. "That's not actually what I asked." He kept his expression easy. "I answered what you asked. I asked what you thought about. You told me what you did." A beat. "I thought about the same things everyone on the team thought about," he said. "How to improve the system. How to address what happened. What happened as you describe it. Or what happened." He was quiet for a moment. He was very practiced at managing silences, using them as tools, filling them strategically. This one felt different. She wasn't letting him use it. "Is there a difference?" he said. "You tell me. You've given the official version of the fourth quarter in approximately 11 press conferences. I've read all 11. The language is nearly identical across all of them, which either means you've told the truth so many times it's become rote, or you've told a version so many times it's become rote." She tilted her head slightly. "I'm not here for the version." Mason leaned back in his chair. He kept his hands loose on the armrests, a deliberate choice, the kind of body language management that he'd been doing long enough it was mostly automatic. "You're very direct," he said. "I find it saves time. I find it's often a technique for throwing subjects off balance." "Sometimes," she agreed. She didn't apologize for it. "Is it working?" He smiled. "The real one, not the press conference one. It happened before he could stop it. Something about the clean honesty of the question. I'll let you know at the end of the session." They went for another 40 minutes. She was good, better than good. She knew football well enough that he couldn't obscure himself behind technical detail, which was one of his primary deflection strategies. She knew his career statistics and could contextualize them, which meant she knew when a number was impressive and when it was being used as cover. She pushed on the things he went smooth around, and every time he deflected, she named it. Not aggressively. That was the thing he hadn't expected. She didn't needle or provoke. She just observed, out loud in real time, what he was doing. "You went past tense there, when I asked about your relationship with the offensive coordinator. You've been in present tense for this whole conversation. You described the fourth quarter drive twice now, and both times stopped at the same moment. What happened after that moment?" "That's the official answer. What's the other one?" By the end of the session, he had a headache behind his left eye and a feeling he couldn't name. He ended it at the scheduled time, standing and thanking her, and she thanked him back without any indication of whether she felt she'd gotten what she came for. He went to practice and hit every throw he attempted, and still felt off balance for reasons that had nothing to do with his shoulder. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. He found her at the facility's small bar at 9:15. He hadn't gone looking for her. He'd gone for a drink because he wanted a drink, and the bar was the place to get one. And she happened to be there, one of 4 people in the low-lit room, sitting at the far end of the bar with a glass of something amber and her notebook closed. He sat 2 stools away. She glanced at him and back at her drink. "Off the record?" he asked. "Recorder's in my room." He ordered a bourbon and sat with it for a moment. "You knew that was going to be a hard session," he said. "Yes." "And you did it anyway." "That's the job." She turned the glass slowly on the bar top. She had a habit, he'd noticed, of handling objects carefully, with attention. Her hands were interesting, expressive, in the way she used them when she talked, but still when she wasn't. "You were better than I expected, technically. You're well trained at this." Is that a compliment or a critique? Observation. He watched her profile. The bar was doing the thing bars did, softening the edges of the room, making the ordinary feel worth lingering in. She had good bone structure, and the focused quality of someone whose brain never fully stopped, and he was aware that he was studying her the same way she'd been studying him for 45 minutes. And that was probably not the direction this evening needed to go. "Why the gaps?" he said. She looked at him. "In your transcripts, you read gaps. You said it. What I don't say is what you're reading. Why does what I don't say matter?" She considered the question seriously, which he appreciated. "Because you're not a stupid man. The things you don't say are choices. I want to know what's underneath the choices." "What if there's nothing underneath them?" "Then I'll write that." She looked at him steadily. "But there is. You know there is." He picked up his drink, set it down again. The bar was quiet around them. "What do you think is there?" "I think something happened in that 4th quarter that you haven't told anyone. And I think you've spent 3 months managing the fallout from it without actually dealing with it. And I think that's why you're here at 9 in the evening, getting a drink, instead of sleeping." He was quiet for a long moment. "You're wrong about the sleeping," he said. "Which part?" "I'd be awake regardless. I don't sleep well in the off-season. Too much time to think." She turned on her stool slightly to face him. It was a small movement. The distance between them was the width of one empty stool, and not very much. "What do you think about?" "The game." "The game you lost, or the game in general?" "Both." He looked at her. "You don't let things sit, do you?" "That's also the job." "Must make it hard to have a conversation that isn't work." Something shifted in her expression. The barest flicker. It's not always separable. He found himself wanting to know what that meant. He had a rule about subjects. He'd had it for years, practical and clean and never violated. Because he was Mason Cross, and he didn't do things that handed people leverage. He thought about Marcus. He thought about the transcript. He thought about her question this morning. "What do you think about?" She was closer than she'd been 2 minutes ago. He wasn't sure when that had happened, or which of them had done it. "Off the record," he said again. A question this time. "Still off the record," she said. He kissed her. Not careful, not cautious. He hadn't been cautious in a press conference in years. But this was something more honest than that. Wanting something and taking it, without managing the moment into something presentable. She kissed him back with the same quality of directness she brought to everything else. No hesitation, no performance. Her hand coming up against his jaw and staying there. He heard her exhale when they broke apart. He watched her check herself, a quick, internal accounting, visible only because he'd been watching her expressions all day and had started to learn them. That was she started. Yeah, he said. They looked at each other for a moment. Two people who had just done something inadvisable, and both knew it, and neither was inclined to undo it. She stood. He stood. She didn't say anything, and neither did he, and that was its own kind of answer, and he followed her out of the bar and down the hallway to her room. And when the door closed behind them, the argument they'd been having all evening continued in a different language. She was exactly what he'd expected, and nothing he'd prepared for. He gave her nothing she didn't take for herself, which turned out to mean she took everything. And he let her, because Sloane Mercer in the dark, with her guard down, was the most honest thing he'd encountered in months, and he was starving for honesty. Afterward, her hair loose, and her expression still that careful, calculating thing it always was, but softer around the edges, she said, "This doesn't change tomorrow morning." "I know," he said. She nodded once. He could see her filing it, the fact of him, the fact of this, organized into whatever framework she used for the things she couldn't write down. He didn't leave. She didn't ask him to. They lay in the dark, with the mountains outside and the silence of a facility that had gone to bed, and Mason Cross, who had not slept well in 3 months, slept. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk.